In a quiet Kansas town, a dark secret was buried until it was finally uncovered. A little girl went missing, her absence ignored for 4 years until a disturbing alleged crime was revealed. It was a tragedy that went unnoticed until one phone call changed everything.
This is the worst possible outcome for me. This is my worst nightmare.
Let's dive right in. This little girl's birth name was Natalie Garcia. She loved playing, laughing, and spending time with her sisters. She was just like any other child. But when she was 6 years old, her biological mother says everything changed for her. She and her sisters, Ashton and Ricky, were adopted. The girls were given new names and new lives. But Natalie, now Kennedy Jean Schroer, would never have the chance to grow into the person she was meant to be. Let's start from the beginning. In 2019, the girls' biological mother, Krista Helm, lost custody of them. Battling her own mental health challenges, she said she found it difficult to navigate the hardships of life on her own.
I've lived a hard life. It's been hard having the girls and being mostly by myself.
In the wake of her struggle, Krista says the girls were placed with Christina and Joseph Schroer. While Christina and Joseph took the girls in, promising a loving home, Natalie, now renamed Kennedy, may have ended up in a home filled with alleged neglect. In 2020, Kennedy disappeared. But get this, it would go unreported and unnoticed for years. No one seemed to realize she was gone, and the authorities had no idea where she was or why no one was looking for her. Kennedy's biological mother told us that the girls were taken out of school and homeschooled by the Schroers. With no one seeing them on a regular basis, it was easy for them to not be seen or monitored by others outside of the home. Krista says she desperately tried to stay connected with her daughters, but she was faced with constant rejection.
I would try to send presents and gifts, but they denied me. I never was able to even have a conversation with the two people who adopted them.
It wasn't until September 10th, 2024, 4 years later, that Kennedy's disappearance would be investigated. Rose Hill police responded to a call. According to the affidavit, Christina had allegedly barricaded herself in a room, threatening to harm herself. When officers arrived, things took a surprising turn. Suddenly, it wasn't just a routine call anymore. Police discovered something disturbing, a possible connection to a homicide. Investigators quickly secured a search warrant, and by the morning of September 11th, Rose Hill Police, along with the Butler County Sheriff's Office, started to dig into the Schroers' backyard. But the search was not easy. According to court documents, the Schroers' yard was thick with overgrown grass and weeds, so police brought in cadaver dogs, hoping for a sign. And finally, after what seemed like forever, a hit. Officers discovered something. Buried 23 inches deep, wrapped in a trash bag, the decomposed remains of a child. Investigators were able to identify the remains as those belonging to 6-year-old Kennedy, but there was still one more step to verify it: DNA testing. Police later showed up at Krista Helm's door, the woman who had been desperately searching for her biological daughters for years. She told us she had no idea this was how she would learn about her daughter's location.
The police come to me. Butler County Detective's Office came to me to get DNA swab of my cheek to prove it was my child because the decomposition was so bad of her body.
A coroner later determined Kennedy had died from probable suffocation and her death was ruled a homicide. Now the authorities had one goal: to piece together the shattered story of what had happened to a young girl who had vanished without a trace. Both Christina and Joseph Schroer were taken into custody. Christina was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, 4 counts of child abuse, felony theft, 4 counts of forgery, Medicaid fraud, and desecration of a corpse. Joseph faces different charges. He was arrested on suspicion of 4 counts of child abuse, liability for crimes of another, interference with law enforcement, felony theft, and Medicaid fraud. In their first court appearances, Joseph's attorney cited an affidavit stating Christina allegedly confessed. Meanwhile, Kennedy's siblings were removed from the home and placed into the custody of the Department of Children and Families. Their biological mother is fighting to bring them home.
I'm a different person than I was back then. Luckily, I don't even know who that person is anymore. So I feel confident in saying that my girls deserve to come home because they deserve their real mom.
She started a GoFundMe, hoping to raise enough money to afford an attorney who could help her navigate the fight of her life.
Maybe the right person would want to take the case and would try to want to fight for me and my family and Natalie, more importantly, to get the justice that she deserves.
As the road ahead remains uncertain, Krista has an emotional message for her daughters. If you could say anything to Ashton and Ricky, what would it be?
I love you. I miss you. And I want you to come home.
And here to discuss this case with me is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Josh Cornman. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just jump right in. First, does the biological mother have an uphill battle? Will she be able to get her girls back?
I think she does have an uphill battle. I don't know what happened back in 2018, 2019 when she lost her rights to her kids, whether she voluntarily relinquished those rights or whether there was a parental termination hearing that went through court. But from what I understand from the little bit that I've been able to read about the case is um, these three kids were adopted um, by this other family. And usually, when adoption happens like that, then someone's parental rights have been terminated, which means that under the law, she is no longer their parents anymore. So I would think that, again, I don't know exactly how the law is in Kansas, but I would think she would have a huge uphill battle to try to get the rights of those kids back.
Well, what do you think she needs to do to be successful?
Well, so this is an issue that a criminal defense lawyer wouldn't be representing her. She'll have to get a family law attorney, someone who's familiar in adoption proceedings, and basically file a petition with the court to try to gain custody back. And again, I don't know what the allegations were back then of why she lost the rights to her kids, whether it was physical abuse or some kind of neglect. But that would have gone through a court process, and a judge at that point in time would have had to make a decision whether she would get her kids back or get visitation, or ultimately, whether her rights would have been terminated. And in order for an adoption to happen, that means that her rights would have been terminated.
Well, what do you think happens to the girls, right? The other two sisters that were put up for adoption and now they're back into the state's custody. Do they get adopted again?
So it could. So generally, if there's an allegation of abuse, and there's a dual investigation, law enforcement as well as children's services would be doing an investigation. And I sounds like that's what's been going on for the last 5 months or so, certainly within the last couple of days of an arrest being made. So I think those two children would have gone back into foster care, into state's custody. Generally, when protective services is involved and the kids go into foster care, they again, there's going to be hearings that go on in family law court about what's in their best interest or what should happen to them, and whether they will end up getting adopted by another family or they will go into some kind of a state living facility, a group home or something, or what however the foster care system would work in that area of Kansas.
Now let's talk about Kennedy, the little girl that was found buried. She was missing for years. How does something like this even happen to where no one even notices that she's gone?
That's kind of baffling when you hear about this story. For someone who's 6 years old, I guess at the time of disappearance, it makes you wonder. This is a small town. From what I understand, it's I guess maybe 5,000 people or so. So I think people know each other. I wouldn't imagine that there's very many schools. So how a child could just stop showing up to school and that nobody has checked on that child, especially a child who had been in, it sounds like in state custody before, would have gone through the proceedings in order for an adoption to happen and for someone's parental rights to have been terminated previously. That child had certainly been in the state system with children's services before. So the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any follow up in this maybe 5 year period, um, or that the schools, there wasn't a truancy violation for her not being signed up or showing up at school, it's baffling. And again, especially when you have two other children that are related and have been adopted, I don't know how old those kids are, but I would have to assume the same thing over a 5 year period. They would have also been in school. Um, you know, During this 5 month period when I guess when the allegations were first brought out to law enforcement and the investigation happened, I would imagine that those two children would have been interviewed. A forensic interview would have been done. Law enforcement, children's services would have interviewed those kids, and um, maybe they have some answers to what's been going on the last 5 years, or what happened back in November of 2020 when they believed that the child died.
Now, the couple has been charged separately. The husband, Joseph Schroer, was charged with lesser crimes. Can you break that down for us?
I guess the husband and wife have different charges. The wife certainly has more severe charges. She is charged with first degree murder, as well as child abuse, interference with the investigation. There's some theft and deception and forgery. So she obviously has the most serious. However, he is also charged with aiding and abetting, and aiding and abetting carries the same sentence that I guess whoever you would have aided and abetted or whoever would have assisted, criminal responsibility is the same for both of them. So depending on what that aiding and abetting charge goes to, he could be facing the same types of penalties that she does. Based on their bonds, though, it doesn't seem that that is the case. His bond was only $10,000. I think she had a $250,000 bond. So I think that kind of indicates to me that whatever culpability or criminal responsibility they feel that he had is significantly less than what they feel that she did. But again, I think it all goes back to this witness in September of last year who sounds like had some kind of a breakdown or something, and then is the one who alerted police to, hey, let me tell you about this homicide from several years ago. That's what led to the search warrant, which led to them finding the body and has led to these charges.
How many years are they facing?
So I believe in Kansas, a murder charge carries life. I think the way Kansas law reads is you can be eligible for parole after 25 years on a murder first degree. Some of the kidnapping charges, I think, carry even more severe punishments. I think that they do it by months, and it could be like 50 years based on the amount of months that you could get for an aggravated kidnapping. So depending if those cases or those counts run concurrent or consecutive, whether they get stacked on top of each other or run at the same time, those are potential life sentences for the two of them.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Josh. This is definitely a case that we will be following closely.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Christina and Joseph have since filed for a divorce. They're expected to go back to court in March.